Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to be joined now by senior producer from NFL Films and also co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. It is Greg Cosell joining us on the line now that Buffalo's roster is set. Look, Greg, I know that you don't bog yourself down with roster makeup per se, but maybe at the skill positions, what is most attractive to you on offense about the skill positions for Buffalo? What stands out, knowing the changes they underwent?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a different receiving core, so that's the first thing you notice. I mean, the back situation, James Cook will be the starter, obviously. It looks like Ray Davis has won the job as the backup, and I think that's a good mix right there because Ray Davis is a different kind of back than Cook, and I think we all agree that we like Ray Davis. I really liked his tape coming out of college last year. But you just look at the receivers. That's where it's different. I mean, Khalil Shakir is still there. He's a guy that can, I would imagine, will predominantly play inside as he did a year ago, but he can move around. So then you have Curtis Samuel. You've got Mac Hollins. You've got Keon Coleman, the rookie. So and you still have Valdez-Scantling, who can run, but has always struggled a bit with consistency in catching the ball. So you really look at the receiver group, and not being there every day at practice, that normally takes time. That normally takes time for a quarterback to feel comfortable. So I think that's the number one thing you would look at with this offense in terms of personnel.
Yeah, and the fact that one of the narratives coming out of Bill's camp is the fact that they're not going to have that number one guy who every time he comes in the huddle is going to be target one. Should give at least Josh Allen mentally the freedom to throw to any receiver he wants. Plus with a guy like with the tight end, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, particularly Kincaid as being a really top flight receiving option, that does change the equation for Buffalo's offense and how they're going to be defended.
Without question. It also raises the question as to what will be the balance between playing, and of course we're talking now in normal down and distance, not necessarily third and long. What will be the balance between playing between 12 personnel, where they have one back and two tight ends, Kincaid and Knox, who can both detach from the formation and basically line up as wide receivers, versus the percentage of 11 personnel where they play with one back, one tight end, and three wide receivers. So, early on, maybe it's possible you see more of 12 personnel until the receivers sort of show who they are. I mean, obviously they want Keon Coleman to become kind of the guy and be their X receiver who you can line up to the boundary where he gets a lot of one-on-one matchups and ideally win and really have Josh Allen feeling confident that he can throw the ball to him, even if it appears that he's covered, because he does have great size, great hands, and the ability to make tough contested catches. But you never know. You guys know, you've been doing this a long time. You never know with a rookie until it kind of happens in the regular season.
8 of the 10 draft choices for the Bills made the roster, Greg. And on the defensive side of the ball, I guess the most notable ones would be Dwayne Carter and Javon Solomon, who are both going to be part of that 8-man rotation that the Bills typically employ on the defensive side of the ball on game day. I know we've talked to you about Solomon before. Is there anything about Dwayne Carter's game that catches your eye? I believe you liked his tape coming out.
I did. He struck me as just a real solid guy. In other words, I didn't necessarily see him as a dominant type player. Is it possible down the road he could become that guy? I mean, theoretically, you never know how a guy develops over time. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he can't become, a better player per se than I think he showed on tape. But I think he's a really, really solid player who can play multiple positions along your defensive front. I don't think he's a defensive end, so I don't think you'll see him outside very much. But, I think he's one of those guys that, he's got some off-the-ball quickness. He's got natural power. I wouldn't call him explosive. I wouldn't say he's flexible. But I think that there were times he did look quick in confined space. I would say he's more of a power player than an athletic player. But I think he's just one of those really solid rotational interior D linemen.
We had a chance to hear Sean McDermott also talk a little bit about Dawuane Smoot, who
Yeah.
it was an 8-year guy who's been around, and he said he really had a good camp, kind of like a real veteran, savvy, smart dude. What are your
Yes.
thoughts about Smoot as a player?
I like Smoot. I've always liked Smoot ever since he came out of college, which you said 8 years. Wow, I can't believe that's the case. But he can play inside, he can play outside. He's got some pass rush to him. I thought that was a really good pickup because he's one of those sort of versatile D linemen that can do a lot of things for you. And as I said, depending on how they want to line up their fronts and what they want to do with specific personnel usage against specific opponents, Smoot can play inside or outside. That was a really good pickup, in my opinion.
Knowing how much film you watch, I know you usually do offense and defense mostly, Greg. Have you spent any time looking at the new dynamic kickoff through the course of the preseason?
I mean, I've just seen it in a couple of preseason games that I took a peek at. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I mean, obviously, they want the kickoff to be more of a factor. It looks like, kind of a glorified running play now. The weirdest part for me, Brownie, is when the ball's kicked, seeing nobody move. I mean, I had to kind of get used to that. You watch the ball kicked off. Steve, you must think this is nuts. Back from when you played, the ball gets kicked off and nobody moves.
Yeah, it's strange. It was the same thing when they started doing a standing start when they kick off the last 6 or 7 years. Now they're going even a step further and putting everybody down close to the ball carrier. And really, that it's obvious what they're trying to do. They don't want big, strong dudes running in opposite directions, not trying to avoid each other.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you get guys are getting bigger and faster and more athletic and more explosive, and they just don't want guys with running starts. They're trying to prevent injury. Obviously, they also want the play to come back into the game as a meaningful play, because now I'm no expert on this whatsoever, but just I've heard people talk. It seems like the way you block this, it's more like a running play than which I guess it was anyway. But still, it just looks more like that now because they're closer together.
Right, and it looks like the end of a running play in the broken field, right? I mean, so you got a lot of traffic, and they're giving the return guy some space, but they're not giving him that much. They're not giving him time. They're giving him some space, but he doesn't have much time. And I think the timing of it is going to be really the crucial factor that sets really good return teams from teams who are not so good, is how the return blockers engage the coverage guy, and how in relation to that moment and where the return guy hits it, or how fast he hits it. The timing is going to be the crucial element as to be successful or not. And I think given the way the kick is unpredictable, it's going to be hard to anticipate.
Yeah, it'll be. You certainly would know more about this than I would, but I think, as I said, I think the two main things is they wanted to ideally limit injuries, and they want the return to become a more significant part of the game again. I mean, because theoretically, it was an exciting part of the game. Every once in a while, you'd see guys return, go for a touchdown. That was kind of lost.
Yeah, nobody returns them anymore. Particularly,
no one returned them. Yeah,
they just say, "Forget it. We're going to kick it out of the end zone. You can have the ball wherever they put it, and we're not giving you up the big play." Now you're penalized if you don't return it.
Isn't it if you kick it out of the end zone? Doesn't the ball come out a little further than it was before?
30, yeah,
to the 30, yeah.
So as opposed to the 25, and maybe that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot.
Yeah. Greg, the Bills picked up quarterback Mike White, added him to their practice squad. It's somewhat injury insurance with Mitchell Trubisky going down with a knee injury in the Pittsburgh preseason game a couple of weeks ago, and his status is still very much up in the air for week 1. What is your book on Mike White, as a backup quarterback in this league?
I mean, I think that's his role. I think we've seen over the years that when he plays in kind of short bursts, that he can play reasonably well. He's a guy I remember watching him in college. He was Western Kentucky, if I recall.
Yes.
And the thing about a guy like Mike White is he tends to be very aggressive, which theoretically is a positive, but he may not be the kind of guy from an ability standpoint that can play like that. But you can certainly put him out there. He's tough in the pocket. Is he had dinner with Matt Milano anytime recently? Since
Yeah,
but
he joked about that. He said the next
yeah.
time we have practice in the stadium, he'll be looking for a piece of his rib at the 35-yard line. So he remembers.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I say this. Look, every team wants to have a quality backup, but it reminds me with the Bills in particular. When a number of years ago, I was sitting at the bar at the JW Marriott at the Combine with Tom Moore, and he told me an unbelievably great story. And you guys, if you've heard Tom Moore speak, I can't pretend to talk like Tom Moore, but we were talking about backup quarterbacks, and somehow it came up, and he said, we never gave our backup quarterback any reps at all in Indianapolis when Peyton Manning was there. And the bottom line was, and he tells it great, of course, way better than I'm going to, but it's still very funny. And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, if Peyton can't play, we're effed." And he said, "We don't really practice being effed." So
That's right.
yeah. So you wonder about that sometimes with the Bills, like everything about their team, not just their offense, would change if Josh can't go.
That's right. Yes, we've been talking about that for quite a while, ever since a couple of weeks ago when Mitch Trubisky did not look so great against the Chicago Bears.
No, he did not. He did not.
Right. So he's been a topic of conversation as we moved along. So let me ask you this. Who do you think has the best situation as a backup in the league?
Overall, in the entire league?
Yeah, what do you think? Is there somebody that jumps out? Because you got these teams like Jacoby Brissett and Drake May.
Yeah.
They can't decide which one's better, or they can't decide which one they want to play.
They know that Drake May is going to be the guy. They just, look, they opened their season in Cincinnati. They probably feel that's not the best way for Drake May to start his career, especially behind an offensive line that probably, to be kind, is a work in progress. God, I'm trying now to think of all the teams in the league. That's a tough thing right off the bat. There's certainly backups now that have started in the league and, meaningfully, and you probably feel a lot more comfortable. I mean, look, there's guys like, I think the Chargers just traded for him too. There's guys like Tyler Heineke who can put out Tyler Heineke for sure, and you can feel good that he's going to play reasonably well. Now, obviously, no one's going to view him as a 17-game starter now, but you can play with a guy like Taylor Heineke. So there's certainly guys like that you're very comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right.
Greg, do you feel like things are different in this division with a healthy Aaron Rodgers? Miami is a team that people still think a lot of, but it's hard for me to get there knowing that they've got their third defensive coordinator and third defensive system in 3 years.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brownie.
That typically takes time to gain traction. The Jets defense always gives the Bills problems. Do you feel like it's a more tightly packed division than we've seen in recent years because of some of the changes?
Yeah, assuming that Aaron Rodgers can play at a reasonably good level. Maybe he's not Aaron Rodgers of 6 years ago, but assuming he's a good player. It's funny that you mentioned the Jets defense. I was watching them this morning, and they're really good. And they've got a ton of pass rushers who can win one-on-one matchups. They can all win with speed to power, and that's where it all starts. I mean, you saw what Rousseau did to Broderick Jones in the preseason game. When you can win with speed to power, that's the starting point for every pass rusher in the league. Any offensive lineman will tell you that. And they are really, really good up front. They've got two really good linebackers. I think their scheme's really good. I mean, the Jets theoretically, and I know we're talking before the season starts and you never know, but you could look at the Jets. If their offense can be good, I mean, obviously they improved their O-line. They've got good running backs. They've got some receivers. The Jets could be a really difficult assignment for anybody if Aaron Rodgers can play at a reasonably good level, because that defense is good.
Yeah, I would agree. We've thought that as well. But if you look at Aaron Rodgers, who's 40, he's got to take 1,000 snaps to get through a regular season. and that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not for the faint of heart, let alone a guy, even though he's like what now going to be 3 years removed from back-to-back MVPs, right?
Yeah, and look, I know everybody talked about how miraculous the coming back from the Achilles was, but that's not just a routine injury. Now I know medicine today and all that's better than it was years ago, and maybe he'll be fine, but that's certainly not a routine injury.
Greg, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We look forward to catching up with you on a weekly basis once we get to the regular season. We'll preview Arizona with you next week.
I can't wait. I've watched a ton of them in the off season just for you, Brownie, just for you.
All right, I appreciate that. We'll discuss it next week. I look forward to it.
All right, thanks, guys.